All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the G
G
G
G
G
G
K
K
R.
R.
Yeah, we did it. Yeah,
Woohoo!
that was our best
I
one
know.
yet, right?
Well,
Yeah,
we practiced that
we were
one.
pretty coordinated there. I feel like we should have been cheerleaders now or something, right?
I mean, eight videos in, I think we should know it.
We are halfway through the GGGKR. This is our halfway
Yes.
point. Lord of Emperors, Book Two of the Sarantine Mosaic. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We did previously discuss the first book, Sailing to Sarantium. And for that discussion, we had the wonderful Alan from the Library of Alexandria with us. Kyle was supposed to be with us for that, but he fell ill. Alan has no good excuse for not being here, but he's not
He
here.
didn't get what Kyle got.
No, no. Well, he actually has an excuse, and we love Alan and we miss him, but he could not be here for this today, unfortunately. So, and unfortunately, because he'll miss the chariot racing discussion that we're gonna have. Sorry, Alan. But
So sad.
c'est la vie. But I'm sure that he will appreciate whatever we have to say once he has finished the book himself. But yeah, thank you both for being here. Kyle, it is wonderful to have you here finally. I've been looking forward to you joining us in the GGGKR. I'm so glad you're better
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Thank you for having me. And I was really bummed I couldn't make Sailing to Sarantium, but I went back and listened and saw Alan arguing about all the history stuff and everything. And we have actually a virtual restraining order. I don't know. It's like really on the down low, so we can't appear on videos together. So that's why he's not here. It's a whole thing.
It's destiny or fate or something.
I've never seen them in the same place at the same time.
Ah, I don't know what
You're
that
on to something.
And Evan, my friend, it is so good to see you. I look forward to this as much as I look forward to reading the books, which I love. So this is such a great journey, and I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about Lord of Emperors. We're going to start non-spoiler for a while, and we will warn you when we get to the spoilers. So, Kyle, why don't you start us off? Tell us your non-spoiler thoughts on Lord of Emperors, and you can go into the Sarantine Mosaic as a whole if you wish as well.
Sure, sure. So, Lord of Emperors is my favorite Guy Gavriel K book. I've
Wow.
read most of them now. I haven't read the last two, A Fiona of Our, Jezebel, and All the Seas of the World. So I've read most of his books.
Okay.
Lord of Emperors was my favorite upon finishing. It stayed my favorite the whole time, never wavered. And then when you were doing this, I threatened to toilet paper your house if you didn't let me onto this one. And you were like, okay, okay, please don't. And so I did a reread. So the thing is that Lord of Emperors got better for me in hindsight. As like every time I thought about it, I was like, oh, I like that book more. And so there's always a hesitation going into a reread because it's not like I knew I wouldn't love it, but I'm like, would it not meet those like expectations? And it's only been 3 years since I've read it. And Sailing to Sarantium was pretty much like a pretty similar experience. Like I really liked it. Like it's a really good book. I tend to think with Sailing to Sarantium, it's more of a complete story than people give it credit for, but it is obviously still like a half of a story. But like I feel like there's the journey in and of itself kind of comes to a fruition for a lot of the characters, and they like do a lot of changes during that, and then some of like the narrative, like with Zodicus and stuff like that, kind of. So I think it's a little bit more of like its own book than people tend to kind of say it is, but it just really suffers a little from like you just start getting invested and they get to the city and then you got to wait for the next book. But going into Lord of Emperors, I was a little nervous, like 30% of the way in, because I was really liking it. Everything was great, but I didn't feel that like this is one of my favorite books of all time energy. And I was like, oh no, are we losing the plot? And then we got to the chariot race. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am proud to tell you that this book is absolutely incredible. I love it so much. Like, so chapters 10 and 11 of this book, like next to each other, and we'll obviously go into them in spoilers. It took me so long. Like I was staying up in bed reading. Like I have a baby laying next to me, and I'm trying to read on my Kindle, and I just keep rereading passages of chapters 10 and 11 because they're just so good. It took me like an hour to read chapter 11 because I just kept going back, and then I would just like stare off into space and think about other things in the book. And I was like, this book is so good. And then like, yeah, the whole second half of this book just moves me. I'm just so touched by a lot of it. I find there's a lot to say about art and the human condition and where we place power and what we find meaningful and the idea of legacy. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Alexander Hamilton who said, what is a legacy but planting seeds in a garden you'll never see? I do believe that was Alexander Hamilton. Don't fact check me. And yeah, so in the last 3 years, I've had a little bit of life changes that I think brought a little bit more perspective to this. One, I am now a dad, so I related to Crispin a little bit differently. Like, I was just able to place myself in, like, oh, how horrible it would be to lose your kid to the plague. Like, obviously I knew before, but like it hits a little different when you actually are a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I also at Worldcon last year, I went into like the art exhibit, and I've never been like a big fan of art. Like, I don't like dislike art, but I've never been like moved by like aesthetic art. And I was there with, my friends and everything, and I just was like, wow, this art is incredible. Like, there was so much good art there. Like, I just realized I had never like looked at good art. And that like really opened me up to how like I remember looking at a Children of Time painting. Actually, hold on. I know this is not super relevant, but it's relevant to what I'm saying. I saw this painting there, which is the Children of Time like special edition painting. It's kind of hard to see on here, but it was like a $25,000 painting by Donato. I don't know how to say his name. I'm so sorry. And it just like moved me. Like, I was just like staring at it. And that's why I got that, so I could remember that. And so rereading the Sarantine Mosaic hit me different in terms of everything talking about art, because I really feel like now I get that a little bit more. And then the third thing is I started working, I do like suicide helpline now. And so I talk to a lot of people who are like really at their lowest point in life.
Wow.
And so I but understood more of some of the things going on with Crispin. Not that I didn't understand before, but just like the depth of how he felt dulled by the loss of his family. And, he's this artist. Like, art is how he's moved in all of these things. And then he's obviously so depressed and still in his grief. And then as he goes through this journey, that changes. And how that changes kind of echoes to some degree how I've talked to some of the callers and stuff about how they've like gotten through things and all that. And so like I just felt like that brought a new perspective to Crispin's emotional journey that I felt was really moving. So that was really long-winded, but I wasn't here for the last discussion.
Oh yeah.
And all to say is that this is still my favorite Guy Gavriel K book. I love it. If I have a criticism of it, it's what Evans was last time, which is just that like every lady's like, ooh, Crispin. But that's small. That's small potatoes to me. But I do notice it. I'm just like, oh man, come on. But yeah, so Besmer's Beale
makes you almost want to be a mosaicist, right?
I do actually. I had a discussion one time with a friend, Sarah Reeds, and Jake Bishop about this series, and we were talking about how some people say that about Crispin, and Sarah said this line that was just kind of an offhanded thing, but I thought about it while I was reading this one. She's like, has anybody just considered that Crispin is really bangable? And while reading this, it was actually it actually kept coming back to me, because I was like, I actually think like Guy Gavriel K has a whole thing where he his protagonists, everybody, there's just always people are enamored with his protagonists. But I do think in Sarantine Mosaic, it is a little bit more. I do feel like Crispin is specifically meant to be attractive versus just like the main character, which is funny because I still think it's like, it doesn't change my criticism, but it is funny that like he just walks into a room and all the girls are like,
yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I think he's specifically supposed to be like an attractive man. So that's funny.
Yeah. Or it's more like they show up in his room. Yeah. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, cool. That was wonderful. Thank you very much, Kyle. Evan, your non-spoiler thoughts on...
Yeah, that was absolutely wonderful, Kyle. All that. And I particularly relate to the being a father and a new father, and that changing so much. I mean, it's amazing how much art that changes for you in a way that deepens so much. So I loved what you said there. It must be because Philip is a doctor, or maybe because he's got a soothing personality, which we can all agree on, that I have repeatedly enlisted him as my therapist after I've been critical of one of Kay's books. I always feel bad, and the good, Dr. Chase reassures me, says, no, it's good to be honest. And then I pay him $80.
Philip is really, really patient, understanding, wise, considerate, loves everything except Dandelion Dynasty and Ken Liu. He just hates them, just won't read another word.
I treasure when Philip dislikes something. I treasure it. And I can't wait for him to go off.
He would rather die than read 5 pages of The Veiled Throne with me. Like, he's just out. So, but anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had to get that one dig in about Dandelion Dynasty. Go on, Evan.
I love that Dandelion Dynasty review from Philip. I treasure that.
Sorry.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't like to criticize, and mostly because, as I've mentioned many times before, I have low confidence in my own opinion, and it's more likely that I'm missing something than the book is, or that I'm mistaking a matter of taste for a flaw in the writing. So after not loving Sailing to Sarantium and feeling bad about it, I read Lord of Emperors with extra attention, and I'm happy to say that I think it's a better book, a great book, even.
Mhm.
Many of the techniques that Philip and Alan and I flagged in our first chat as odd or seemingly out of left field reveal their purpose in Lord of Emperors and are deployed, I think, with greater precision. In fact, I think this is the book where Kay's rhetorical strategies are best calibrated to his subject. The form of the novel itself reinforces its themes. It's something that Kay's been striving for since Fiona Var. We've seen it. And if sometimes we've located a gap between his enormous ambitions and his execution, in this book, I think he grasps what he's reaching for.
Wow.
Lord of Emperors is very different from Sailing to Sarantium. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that this book has a lot of viewpoint characters,
Hmm.
29 by my count. It almost goes without saying that this book is a mosaic. And when you stand back and look at it, what you see is a detailed picture of Byzantine or Sarantine life in late antiquity. Um, and it draws from all levels of the social hierarchy. Now, have I grown to love Crispin? Not exactly,
Okay.
but no longer dominating the narrative. I like where he fits in the balance of this larger cast. And I think that love is the wrong word anyway. This book is simply not as interested as so many fantasy novels in forging deep emotional bonds with the characters for the reader. It's certainly possible to do that, and I'm sure many readers have, but it's not the end all be all here. And Kay does a number of things intentionally that complicate those identifications, even hinder them at times. One reviewer described the book in a complimentary way as hieratic, which I take to mean that the characters have at times an iconic quality, and events are at times imbued with the kind of ceremonial symbolism, which encourages the reader to take one foot out of the story and contemplate rather than identify. So, if you're a reader who likes to stay with the immediate and the personal, you might find that an obstacle to your enjoyment here. But to me, these risks, and they are risks, are the most thrilling parts of Lord of Emperors. It's not without flaws, and there are times when Kay leans away from my personal taste, which we can get into later. It's not my favorite book of his, but I think it's possible to make the argument that it's his best,
Hmm.
so far at
Very
least.
easy to make that.
Wow. Wow. High praise. And I find it so serendipitous that we're having this discussion shortly after, Evan, you released your latest video on your channel, The Nerd Writer, which is a video about William Blake. And in particular, what you're talking about is his vision being one where it's a combination of poetry and art, and that there is, if you separate those things, you lose something, right? The totality of the vision depends upon these things being on the page together. And I feel like that's an appropriate observation in a sense for what Guy Gavriel Kay is doing as well in this story, because I love, one of the things I love about his books so far is that he's so brilliant at incorporating other forms of art besides writing and into his just appreciation of beauty and life and the human experience. And in here, it's mosaic, but it doesn't matter. It could be music, like in a song for Arbonne. It could be any number of different ways in which we express ourselves. But here it's mosaics, and it's just so beautifully done. The thing that I always think of, and I said this before, I think, but the first word I think of when I think of his books is beauty. And I feel that he, um, has a way of helping me to appreciate so many other things, not just art, but also history and other things. I mean, he's a writer who gets us to go look up, okay, who exactly was this historical figure? You know, you always feel like you have to bone up on your history when you're reading a Guy Gavriel Kay book, and I appreciate that as well. So there's just this totality to his vision, and what he does for me as a reader that I deeply appreciate. And that was certainly very true of the Sarantine Mosaic. It's just beautifully done, as always. All that said, I mean I don't like ranking things and all of that, as you may have heard before. I don't like ranking things. Um, I think at this point, and this one has to sit with me for a while. I love the way you put it, Evan. It may not be my favorite, but maybe what he achieved, in terms of his vision here, you could rank it among the eight books we've read so far as the best. But for me, I think it's still going to be either A Song for Arbonne or perhaps The Lions of Al Rassan. If I have to pick a favorite, it's probably going to be one of those two.
I can't believe we even got you to say that much about
I know,
it.
right? Yeah.
Those are far and away
Unprompted.
my three favorites of the ones you've read. So, in
Yeah.
fact, those are three of my four favorite GGK books. So,
Okay.
you're in good company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tigana, Arbonne, and Elbasan are kind of the leading the pack for me. Um,
We'd
and
gone.
uh, I really love Tigana, and I can't really get it out of my head. I
Really?
recognize, like I was saying before, that I think this is probably a more accomplished book, but it just terms of
Sometimes
how
a
I
book just speaks with you.
responded
Yeah,
to
for
it.
sure.
Yeah.
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 One thing.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Sorry, I was just gonna say one thing that I love about Guy Gavriel Kay, and I didn't like necessarily think about this reread in that terms, but it's just like a through line of him. Is like I feel like he brings out the idealized version of humanity that like it always really inspires me, and it's through art, but it's also just through like there's lots of like little things in especially Lord of Emperors where it's like all these great things are happening, but that doesn't matter to the shepherd whose sheep is stolen. Like it's like everybody's
Yeah.
lives are equally important, and like he has all these like things that you could say, and it could like you could write it a little differently, and it could feel like it was in like a fortune cookie, and you're just like you like roll your eyes at it, but then like the way he writes it is just like a little bit more refined, a little bit more deep and introspective, and then you're like, yeah, life is precious, or like whatever like almost basic thing he says, but he makes it not basic. And I was reading the last one that I read before Sarantine Mosaic reread was Children of Earth and Sky. It was my
Mm.
first time reading it, and I was just like so like at the end of that book, just like I just felt like I was like, oh man, being a human is such a treasure. Like I just he's the only author that makes me feel like when he's talking about like art and humanity and like what's worthwhile and all this stuff and like what you stand for. I'm just like, man, like I could be a better person. Like I don't know, like it's just like so inspiring. I'm just like not even like I could be a better person, but like we could be better, like as people. And I just like I always find that, and it's the way he writes, like you said, like culture and art and the human spirit and stuff. I just think always like really speaks to me and makes me want to um, think about what it means to be a human on this earth. And I think that's really special.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. I mean, you get to the end of a Guy Gavriel Kay book, and for me anyway, I just feel this overwhelming sense of melancholy and transcendence and connection and just appreciation for life, you know. And that's something I think he does maybe like no other author I know. I love getting to the end of one of his books because you can just feel that starting to well up in you as you're getting toward the end and you're seeing it coming, and he still manages to surprise me at the end of every book. He loves doing that, I think, is to give you a little bit of a surprise at the end. And I always find I'm initially like, wait, no, I don't like that. And then I'm like, wait, okay, maybe he's got something going here, He does that to me almost every book. Like he'll give me a twist that I wasn't expecting. So now I'm expecting a twist. But
Starts
The
and
next book
starts
will
and
just
finishes.
be
Starts and
it'll
finishes
just
are he's
be
incredible at starts and finishes.
yep, yep, he really is. Yeah. Sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, I just was making it like the next GGK book you read will have no twist. You'll be expecting a twist, and you'll
That'll be
play
the
it straight the whole
twist.
time.
That's
Yeah.
the twist.
There is no twist. Gotcha. So yeah. All right.
What's after Lord of Emperors? Is it Last Light of the Sun?
Yeah, it's the
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Anglo-Saxon Norse
yeah.
inspired
You're
one.
gonna you're gonna love that one.
That's right.
Me, I would rather just watch The Last Kingdom, but
Yeah. It's brilliant. All right. Well, I think any other non-spoiler thoughts before we jump into the spoiler part of our discussion?
The chariot race in this book is transcendent. Oh, I have a little bit of a funny story. So when I first read Lord of Emperors, I was going to meet Guy Gavriel in the city like near me, and so I had to drive 2 hours to get there, and I wasn't quite done. So I finished the book on audio, and I was like, in tears while driving. I was like,
Oh
oh my
my
god.
goodness.
So then I go there, and Guy Gavriel, very nice. He's like, if you have more than like just the newest book, that's fine. Just go to the end, and I'll sign them all. So I had like 6 or 7 books, whatever. I went to the end, and so then he's signing stuff, and so he's signing like for a little bit. So I have a little bit longer to talk with him, and I was like, I finished Lord of Emperors today, and it might be my favorite of your books. That chariot race was just like transcend. I couldn't believe how much I love that chariot race. And then he looks at me and he's like, that's really good to hear because I thought the chariot race and sailing to Sarantium was pretty damn good. And I knew I had to top it for Lord of Emperors. So I put a lot of effort into the chariot race. And so it's really nice to hear that really resonated with you. And I thought it was funny that he was like already too, he's like, I did pretty good at sailing to Sarantium. So yeah, chariot race is like one of my favorite chapters
It's
in the
worth the
book.
price of admission for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Great stuff. Too bad Alan is missing this discussion.
Too bad, Alan. So sad.
If only he had someone else to blame.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to jump into spoilers. This is your warning. So if you have not yet read Lord of Emperors, we have to do the Kyle. You got to do
Spoiler robot.
the spoiler bot dance. So, and now we are doing spoilers. We're going to start actually with a slide. You got it. A slide.
This is what they come for. This is what they come for.
This is what brings the
Homework.
crowds.
Thank you for mentioning the Blake video and thank you for watching it because I'm very proud of that one first of all, and
It's brilliant. Yeah.
also I was so deep in the research for that project while I was reading Lord of Emperors, and so it's impossible for it not to have some kind of influence on me.
Yeah.
And I found that I love when unexpected things spark and have an interaction that you don't expect. So I always try to read very random things next to each other because you never know. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I feel the spirit of AP Canavan. So let's talk some narrative perspective. Let me
You
just
sure that's
share
not
my
a poltergeist?
It could be. Okay, do we see that?
We do.
So I want to talk about do a little bit of a close reading of just a couple paragraphs here because I think and Kyle mentioned chapter 10, chapter 11 are just outstanding. This is from chapter 10. It is, I think, maybe the most important part of the book in terms of explaining what Kay is doing here.
I have this highlighted to talk about, so I'm glad that you can take over. You've thought about it more.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny that we both highlighted it. Yeah.
It's impossible not to highlight. I think it's such a great part. So let's just take it little by little here. The race that followed was remembered for a very long time, right? So the first sentence, we have an omniscient narrator in the building. I mean, that is something we need to notice right away. This is what a third person omniscient narrator, this godlike figure that stands outside the story and has unrestricted access to time and space and character might tell us something like this. And what's also really important to note is the temporal cross pressure here. We have the race that followed pointing to the future, was remembered pointing to the past, with the word time here as a nice button on the sentence for emphasis.
I do love how he does have a narrator who takes you out of the immediate story.
Yes,
quite frequently. That's a technique that
that is exactly what I want to highlight here. Even with the events that ensued that day and immediately after, the first afternoon race of the second Hippodrome session that year was to become legendary. In both sentences, this and the first one, the narrator's freedom to move in time, his omnitemporality, is used to create tension. We want to see this legendary race that we're hearing about, and also the events that ensued that day and immediately after which the narrator suggests is a big deal too. An emissary from Moscow who had accompanied the Grand Prince's entourage and remained behind through the winter in slow negotiations over tariffs, was in attendance and would chronicle the race in his diary, a record that would be preserved miraculously through 3 fires in 3 cities 150 years apart. Now, this narrator is starting to feel less like a god and more like a historian. He's
Mhm.
backing up his claim that the race was legendary by providing a source, the emissary's diary. That's something that that historians do. Omniscient narrators don't need sources. But as we know from, for example, Tolkien's prologue in The Lord of the Rings, this kind of pseudo historiography, like the trivial detail about tariff negotiations that's never mentioned again, can create a sense of authenticity that facilitates immersion. But I think Kay's intention is deeper than this. He is purposely comparing and in some ways likening the role of the historian to the role of the fictional narrator. His great subject in this book is history itself, how it's constructed, how it feels to the people who are living through it, how we shape it, and it shapes us. And Kay is careful to show us just how contingent our understanding of history is.
Mm.
This diary that he's talking about, it almost burned up 3 times. What about all the sources that did burn up, the ones that didn't make it? What about the writings of the people who were not so close to power, like this emissary? What about the people who couldn't read or write at all? With all that's necessarily, left out, how accurate can our idea of the past be?
Hmm.
There were those in the Hippodrome that day for whom the racing held more importance than mighty events of war and succession and holy faith. It is always so. Okay, so now we're dispensing with sources again. The omniscient narrator is back, or else the historian is taking liberties, something that Kay wants us to think about, a possibility he wants us to think about. But it's this last short sentence. It is always so.
Hmm.
That is a momentous shift. The narrator isn't just telling a story here, he's commenting on the story. And let's see what he has to say about that. The apprentice, decades after, might recall an announcement of war as having taken place the day the chambermaid finally went up to the loft with him. The long-awaited birth of a healthy child will resonate more for parents than the report of an invading army on the border or the consecrating of a sanctuary. The need to finish the harvest before frost overwhelms any response to the death of kings. A flux in the bowels obliterates the weightiest pronouncements of holy patriarchs. The great events of an age, to those living through them, appear as backdrops only to the vastly more compelling dramas of their own lives. And how could it be otherwise?
Hmm.
Now,
What a
in
quote.
content here, this is the statement of a major theme of the Sarantine Mosaic.
Yep.
But what's even more important here is the form. And let's go a little bit into the weeds here. Third person perspective it can be a maddeningly tricky subject. We think of it as divided into 2 neat boxes, third person omniscient and third person limited. But it's really more like a musical mixing board with a number of different sliders. And a writer can tweak the variables to achieve different effects. That said, I think it's safe to say that the godlike omniscient narrator has been declining in popularity for a long time.
Yep.
Third person limited is much more common, and that's definitely so in modern fantasy, especially close third person limited, in which the consciousness of several focalized characters drive the story, and the narrator is almost invisible. I mean, if you look down a list of the most prominent fantasy novels today, you'll find that mode dominating. I have Martin here, George R. R. Martin. I have Brandon Sanderson, Robin Hobb and the Live Ship Traders.
Joe Abercrombie is a great example.
Joe Abercrombie, and here's one that might be even better than them all. Can you
Wow.
see it?
Just
the
lady.
It's The Wavy Dan. It's The Wavy Dan by Philip Chase. This book is told in close third person limited.
We have the author here.
With maybe one section from the POV of a seagull, but besides that, it's all people. The next most common choice, of course, is first person. But this close third choice, it makes sense because close third approaches the intimacy of first person without the restriction of being confined to one consciousness. And the intimacy is useful because empathetic connection with a character can facilitate immersion in the strange, magical worlds of fantasy. And it's
Mm.
also something readers crave to inhabit the consciousness of a character and feel the story from the inside. That level of intimacy is reduced when the story is told by an omniscient narrator. By their very nature, omniscient narrators tend to remind us that we are being told a story, and that is especially true when the narrator starts commenting on the story. Here is the famous last line from George Eliot's Middlemarch, which you might know, but the effect of her being on those around her was incalculably diffusive, for the growing good of the world is partly depended on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs.
I love
This
that
kind of
line.
comment,
Yeah.
this kind of comment is almost essayistic in nature. The kind we see in the Lord of Emperors passage is extremely rare in today's fiction. It was much more popular in the 19th century among writers like Eliot, Tolstoy, and others. But that kind of authority is something modern readers are generally skeptical of and resistant to. These comments, they temporarily halt the momentum of the story for a moment of contemplation. And in the process, they create distance between the reader and the character. Only a very deft writer can zoom out to this bird's eye view and then zoom back in again without losing the reader. Kay does that more than once in the Sarantine Mosaic, shifting from close third to this authorial omniscience and back, and each time is a risk. The question is, what does he stand to gain? And there's another quote about George Eliot that I think is totally relevant to this story. There is an inherent there is inherent in the contemplative attitude a certain detachment, but this detachment is of that ironic and yet sympathetic observer who is seeking to understand what he observes by placing it in a larger context. Eliot challenges the reader to bring this fictional microcosm into the widest possible context he can offer, his own deepest sense of the macrocosmic world. Now let's go back to the final part of this passage. In this same way, many of the men and women there in the hippodrome, and some who were not, but later claimed to have been, would cling to one private image or another of what transpired. They might be entirely different things, varying moments, for each of us has strings within the soul, and we are played upon in different ways like instruments, and how could it be otherwise? So we have
Ah,
each of us,
love that line.
we are played. The narrator is addressing the reader directly, like Eliot's narrator does, as an
Mhm.
equal, prompting an identification with the narrator and inviting us to see the story from the wider perspective of a fictional narrator or a historian, to see how the larger forces shape these characters' lives and choices, and ultimately, going back to that quote, to bring this fictional microcosm into the widest possible context he can offer, the reader's sense of how these dynamics operate in the real world. At the same time, this sentence reminds us to see things from an individual's perspective. It reminds us that we all respond in unique ways, like instruments being played to events that may or may not later be thought of as historically significant. It's those unique responses and the choices that follow that ultimately drive the history that shapes the individuals who make future choices, and on and on and on. It's a feedback loop, or as Yeats visualized it, as a gyre. And we know that
Yeah.
the epigraph of this book is turning and turning in a widening gyre from Yeats' poem, The Second Coming. In its telling, history can't possibly include all the variety, all the music of the human experience, but maybe fiction can supplement what's lost. Or maybe history and fiction are complements that need each other to tell the whole human story. Maybe we need some combination of the omniscient and close third person perspectives, which, of course, is what we get in this book.
Brilliant. I love it.
Chills.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, there's a lot going on here.
You know,
Okay,
you have a lot of like nerdy thoughts about writing. Like I wonder if you could do something with that. Like if you had like nerdy thoughts about writing.
It's so funny because
That
Philip,
was wonderful.
thank you.
It really was.
Philip mentioned in the weeks that were that he sort of suspected that my most basic interest is in how storytelling functions. And
Yeah.
come on, I was laughing when you said that.
It's funny. So like I also not to that depth because you're better at this, but I also think about how like storytelling is done and stuff. And I back in my youth wanted to be an actor. And so like I see a lot of things through like the idea of like seeing a scene in a movie or a TV show or whatever. And so one like random thing I was doing while reading this was trying to visualize how you would adapt this into a TV show, which I didn't do the first time because the first time I was like in the story. I'm not really doing that. But then this time I was really like I was like, okay, like what is the intention of the overall goal? And it really like helps even just thinking about that as a process of what the goal of the story is. Because for instance, I'm not going to get too far into my like adapting it into television thoughts, but when you're trying to do something like that, you have to think what is a story trying to get across. And I think an adaptation of Sarantine Mosaic would be very, very difficult to achieve what Kay is trying to do, because it is trying to do a lot of what Evan just said, like how history and people are like moved individually and all this stuff. And, you know, with the idea that the big events happen, but then there's all the little people around dealing with their own lives and their dramas are just compelling. And I think the thing you'd have to do is like have some sort of narration. Like you'd have to use it sparingly, but there would have to be something to like set the legendary mythic tone of like what's going on. And I actually thought of that exact scene a little bit tiny later because I was thinking the narrator, if I was to do this, would be Cleander, because Cleander later they were like, oh, he got older when he became a man. He did the records, and that's when he became a man. Nice. So I was like, oh, you'd have like an old man Cleander being like, when I was a kid, you know, Sarantine was crazy, you know, like obviously, but like poetic. And then it would kind of go back. And I was like thinking about how that moment in the Hippodrome, all of the people there, they're going to define a portion of their lives that way. And like it's going to go off in different directions for everybody. Obviously, with everything happening with the Emperor, like it's such a momentous day in the history of that city. Every single person there is affected. They're all going to remember that. That's a flashbulb memory for all of them, and it's going to redefine their lives in one way or another. And so it is this idea that these big events happen. Like sure, like you know, Valerius loses his life. Leontes becomes emperor. All these big things happen, but also, you know, Cleander is a quote unquote nobody. I know he's the son of a senator, but in terms of the story, he's a nobody. And that like is a life-changing event for him. Like that sets him on a path to be an entirely different type of person. And through Cleander, we can see that the other thousands of people in there, or the other thousands of people in the city that aren't in the Hippodrome, but are affected by these. And then the people in the other cities that are now going to be at war or aren't going to be at war, they're all affected by these events and how it ripples out, and it creates this whole tapestry or a mosaic, if you will, of humanity, and how these little changes, all these little ripples effects. You know, you think about like Valerius came so close to turning those guards.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he did turn them, but like, first of all, well, reading that scene, it's so excellent because, like, first of all, if you know history, you're playing against the idea that this doesn't happen.
Right.
So you're already working on that. But even just within the book, you're like, this is the Emperor. Like, he's not going to die here. And like, Gavriel does such a great job at making the tension so high, because you get the chapter beforehand with the crazy brother just being like, ha 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 ha, ha. And then Alexiana just like basically just like hightail running out of there. And then, you know, everything with the race being like all the events that happen after. So now as he's having this conversation, you are so tense, but you're like, well, first of all, if you know history, he doesn't die here. And second of all, he's the Emperor. This is clearly not going to happen. And we're halfway through the book. This is not the climax of the book. So he does all of these things to make you think he's going to live. So like the idea of him turning the guards, the nameless guards, is so important to me for the scene because, like, first of all, it gives him an out. You're like, okay, this is how he's going to get out of this. He's going to turn these guards, and then he's going to get the upper hand. Second of all, I do love how Guy Gavriel never forgets the nameless people. Those guards are characters. They might not have names. We don't know anything about them, but they are characters in that scene. They are not setting. He never for a second forgets. Every character in a scene is a character. They have their own thoughts, motivations. Might not be spending a lot of time on them. We don't know what turned those two guards. We don't know what exactly it was that Valerius said to turn them back. Is probably that they were going to burn to death. But we don't know what's going on in their head. We just know how it's impactful for the scene. But he gives you just the tiniest bit of enough to understand that these are human beings that are living their whole lives. And same with like when Alexiana was leaving, and there's the head of the guards,
Yep.
and we've never seen this character. We don't know his name, and then he kills the other guard. He's like, I couldn't be sure of him, but I can be sure of him.
Yeah.
And then now you just see how like this guy's a dude. He's like lived his whole life. He knows all of his comrades. He trusts the one guy that's left super well. He was a little like it tells you so much and so little, and you never have to think about that character again. But it just lets you feel like everybody's real. And so in that moment, to bring it back to in the hippodrome, if he had turned those guards 30 seconds earlier, and or the guards, instead of being hesitant, were firmly on his side, and they had stopped Lespidius, or what, the freaky pyromaniac guy, if they had stopped him from getting a hold of that thing, the entire history of the continent would be different. Because Valerius wouldn't have died. He would have went to a whole different like it would have changed everything. And that's such a small thing, but that's how the ripple effects of humanity works. Is you can never know that tiny little moment that shifts your life, that shifts the people's lives around you, that shifts the life or the world history. And obviously those two guards would never know that.
Who's the one who actually kills the emperor? The historian.
Yeah, the historian, which is crazy. And he's like, I shouldn't have gotten involved in
in case you didn't, you needed a fine point on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you guys have said it really beautifully. And I love how the ripples from all these events just keep playing out. Even relatively minor characters like Thenaeus, Cleander's stepmother, how her story plays out from these events, and how she unfortunately takes her own life, and how that changes, as you said earlier, Cleander as a person. That's a part of that as well. There's just so many ripples from this, and it's so brilliant how we go from the scene in the tunnel to the chariot race, back and forth with all every time we switch, the tension just goes up each time. And I did feel, though, that when Scordius seemed like he was going to make it, I thought to myself, wait, no, he can't do that. He's going to kill he's going to kill the emperor. He can't, because one of them, I felt like one of them has to go in this situation. You both can't have a miraculous, last minute save. And I thought to myself, when Scordius seemed like he was going to make it, I thought, oh no. And that
like,
just
you're
that didn't make it
entirely
less
right.
compelling. That didn't make it less compelling. I was still upset. Like you said, Kyle, I was like, wait, you can't do that. That's not how it went in history. But that's the point here too, isn't it? So
Totally. And that moment, and that Cleander moment that you mentioned, is another example of the narrator coming out into the fore to be more authorial. And it's happening all throughout the book. And the thing that we talked about last time, the thing that bothered me and Alan to a little extent, was this construction he always uses of afterwards he would think, or later when thinking about that. And now as I'm reading this one, it's not that it's that I think it's that I don't think there aren't still problems with using it so many times, but it is a moment for it within the close third sections of this book. We get that moment of a narrator saying, actually, no, I'm here too. Don't forget me, because I can see the future and the past, and I have this omnitemporality. So obviously, if you're only doing a close third perspective from what the person can see, what they can, what they can think about. They don't know what's in their future. I mean, that's not typically in a close third perspective. And so we
I think
have these
there's a
inflections of a narrator coming in, and I found that very interesting reading this book after.
tonally though, there's a slight difference, I think, between the two books, where he uses that technique in the first book, it's often played as a comic, it has a comic effect. Whereas in this book, like with the passage you read, Kyle and I both got chills when you were reading that. I mean, he's going for something a little
Well,
more.
that one is way more elevated, but
Yeah,
that's like the
Yeah, that's a
show-stopping
pinnacle.
moment.
Yeah.
That's the show-stopping moment of the authorial narrator. But he still has to. I think because it is such a big shift from that to close third person that
yeah,
he had to find ways to kind of uh, sprinkle it throughout, and that's one of the ways he does it. And there are other ways he does it too, like he has the Cleander moment, which is a little more pronounced, and he'll have sections where there's one section where he's talking about the what happens in the winter months when the chariot racing's not going on. They do shows instead, and he goes like through 4 or 5 paragraphs of something that is clearly not focalized, but and it's just details about the world that you would never that you don't necessarily need for the story, except for it adds depth and it reminds you that there is a narratorial voice here that is in control of everything. And there are lots of other moments too. There's the moment where at the end of the chapter, it's like you said, after he does this little big show-stopping moment at the end of this chapter or the next one, there's just a little moment of, and the farmer's cattle died or something, and it was a devastating calamity, and you're like, oh, okay, now I see.
It was a worker died. A worker died in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
calamity.
worker
yeah,
on the farm, a laborer. Yeah,
And I love that's such a I just imagine an editor that's not editing Guy Gavriel okay, but like a newer author, and you put that down, and they're like, you have to cut this line, like you can't end that chapter. Like it's such a bold thing to do, to just be like, oh yeah, and these other guys over here, these don't worry about them, but they're having some stuff. Like it just shows what his intentions are so well, and that's what I mean when I say that, like, he writes such simple things, but in a way that is so poignant and thoughtful, because really that line is nothing. It's just like, oh yeah,
yeah.
a worker died and then it was a big deal. Like that's really, if you're summing it up, but it's like where it is, why it's there, how it's written elevates the entire story. And like you have all these little moments and it builds this whole idea of like, we're all in this giant mosaic or tapestry or whatever you want to say of humanity, and it's all important to us. And in regards to like I didn't get to finish the Sailing to Sarantine video. I had like 20 minutes left, so I didn't hear that specific part you guys were talking about with the like.
well, that's the part where we were talking about you, Kyle. So that's okay.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go back and yell it out. But what I would say to that is it really depends on the moments, because sometimes I agree. And out of curiosity, Evan, do you read Stephen King at all?
I've read 2.
Okay,
So I want to read more.
So I've read every Stephen King book, and his like second favorite thing on earth, besides like blue corduroy jeans, is
Where you're going?
He'll just be like, so Bob was going to the store. It was his last day on earth. Like he does that stuff all the time. And I'm like, I don't need to know that it was Bob's last day on earth. And a lot of times he does it effectively. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, like that kind of ruined the scene for me. But a lot of times it builds tension.
But does he do it? But does he? But in those situations, do we see the end of Bob's life?
In that
yes,
he would. Yeah.
You will.
So that's
you're
a different,
because what we mentioned in the last video was that, and it's all throughout this, we almost every time he uses that construction, it's not for foreshadowing. It's something that is going to happen past the story time of the main narrative.
Yeah. So I think it really would depend on like each line. Like the one that I visualize you guys talking about more, and maybe it wasn't, is when the like oh my god, I'm blanking on the messenger guy, like leaves, the guy who caused all of the assassins, and then he's like, he went into the desert and became a prophet and stuff. Yeah. To me, that I think was, first of all, kind of tying a little bit into Lions of Alderson. I think that was just a nod to that. But then also
Politicus, I think was his name.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be a signal to the reader, like you said, first of all, that there's an omniscient narrator, and also that this character's leaving the story and you can forget about them. Like, to me, it's like saying, this character's exiting the stage, and here's what they did. And I do think, like in that specific scene, it's also doing this whole thing of like his life still had meaning, and like he still affected
Yeah.
things and
Yeah.
made you like consider that. But sometimes I like that, and sometimes I don't. I do think in Lord of Emperors, I like pretty much all of the lines like that because I just think this book is incredible. But this is not the last time the guy Gavriel employs that kind of stuff. And there are times in like other books where I'm like, okay, this is a little too precious. So like I understand where you're coming from with
Yeah,
like with
but
like
I
being
mean,
taken out of it sometimes.
I had problems with it a little bit, but I it was recontextualized reading this book, and I think
Right.
that's kind of part of it. There's a here's a really short one from Pardos section, which is really interesting. Where
Uh-huh.
Pardos sat, he was it's on his way to Sarantine. Pardos was sitting huddled in his cloak, uh, uh, leaning his pack against the rough shelter of the wall and looking up at the far stars and the one white moon and thought about where he was in Jad's creation, which is another whole thing. Kay's characters are always thinking about where they are physically, but also where they are in the hierarchy of things. Where the small, breathing, unimportant thing that Pardos of the Anti was passing this cold night in the world. The stars were hard and bright as diamonds in the dark. Later, he was to decide that the long night had given him a new appreciation of the god. If that wasn't a thought too laden with presumption, for how dare a man such as he speak of appreciating a god? And
Mhm.
this sentence is so incredible because we have the later construction, which is the inflection or the imposition of the omniscient narrator in a close third section of the book. But then in the same sentence, it starts with later he was to decide. And then when we get here, for how dare a man such as he, this construction, how dare a man such as he, that's free and direct style. That is free and direct discourse where the narrator literally takes on like the person who's saying how dare a man is Pardos. You know,
Mhm.
the
Yep.
narration is literally taking on his language. So within one sentence, we have a fully bird's eye view and then a full dive into the narration actually taking on Pardos's own language. And that to me is just brilliant.
Well, another thing that GGK is not afraid to do is introduce a major brand new character in the second book of a duology, and that is, of course, Rustum. And
What a
he,
great character.
what a character! And of course, I think he takes a lot of the time away from, let's say, Crispin. Crispin was the major
Yeah.
POV in the first book, and now it's more divided between the two of them, plus the 20 something other characters that Evan counted who have POV moments.
That's
So
another thing that I think makes it harder. Like for the traditional modern fantasy fan is that like they get attached to Crispin, and then the second book, Crispin's still a major character, but I would not call Crispin the main character of the second book. I would say it's like
No.
kind of split between a couple people like pretty evenly, whereas like he's unequivocally the main character of the first one.
agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. But I loved the introduction of Rustum, by the way, who was mentioned by Zodicus in the first book.
Yes, he
To
was.
Crispin, hey, you should meet this Rustum guy, and here's his address, at this house.
Can we agree
But
that can we agree that the first chapter is just extraordinary? I
Oh,
mean,
it's
yes,
so
I
good.
love the
Yeah,
first chapter.
very, very
saving
good.
the King of Kings and the we get another religion in this world, this sub-created world of it's basically modeled after Zoroastrianism. I love that as well, and it's before the spread of the Asherite religion, but we get hints at the origins of the Asherite faith as well in the meantime.
Mhm.
But the whole scene, I mean, Kay is so brilliant at putting several characters in a room together and having just such tension in these
Yeah.
these key moments that change lives. And of course, yes, the King of Kings, he's been shot by an arrow, and he thinks it's one son, turns out to be the son who's in the room with him, praying for him. Just so much brilliance in this scene. And of course, we know that if Rustum doesn't succeed here, he's already got us attached to this guy. He's a family man. He has a very special son who said, "Hey, Daddy, you're gonna need this, right?" That was such a brilliant
Talk about
Yeah,
butterfly effects on the story.
yeah.
moment.
That's a
Hmm.
huge moment.
Yep, huge moment. So yeah, your thoughts on the opening with Rustum, guys. Go for it. Whatever you want to. say about that.
Go ahead,
That
Go
Kyle.
ahead, Evan.
sequence.
I was just going to say that I love the scene so much. It reminded me because I do think that for me in Sailing to Sarantium, what Philip's talking about of these people in rooms being creating these moments of great tension, that was a little bit missing for me in Sailing to Sarantium. Even though that does happen in the court of Sarantium, I thought that the dialogue was somewhat lackluster in points and didn't really grab me. Whereas in specific scenes in Tigana, like the scene in the lodge, and lots of scenes in Arban with the whole cast, um, uh, were so were so tense and so so good. This first chapter had that quality to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like its own little short story. And I was in on this world that I'd never seen before within just a few pages, and I wanted to I wanted more of that. I wanted to stay in with that. I was fine with us just getting Rustum, and a little more of the rest of the family, but I was so invested, and it was a great start to this book. And also, I think it highlights another theme that Kay is trying to talk about in this book, which is the interaction between the center and the periphery, or different centers and different parts of the world. You have the Bassanids on the east. You have the old Romans, the Rhodians. Is it Rhodian Batiara in the west,
Yeah.
and you have Byzantium in the center. And so now we have the movement in the first book was Crispin going from west to east. Now we have Rustum going from east to west, all meeting up in this one area. And of course, Rustum eventually goes further west when he moves on
España.
to Esperana.
Yeah.
And I think there's a suggestion. I read that there was a suggestion that he is related to Rodrigo Belmonte in Our Son.
I mean, I've had the same thought. Yeah, that
Yeah.
That just
Rodrigo
actually
must
didn't
be
even
the
occur
same.
to me, but I want to like. Did you see why people think that, or is it just hope?
No, I just saw it and I was like,
Huh.
I don't know, but I do
That
like
would
the
be cool.
idea of them going of him going to Esperana, or this kind of Spain area, which is going to become this like tolerant, beautiful space for a brief period. Anyway, loved the first chapter. Absolutely loved it.
Gorgeous. Yeah, Kyle, do you have any thoughts on the introduction of
I mean,
this?
I don't feel like I have much to add. I remember the first time I read it, like just natural resistance to like, no, bring me back to the story that I wanted to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm like, no. And so it took me a couple pages, but like I was just blown away at how good it was. And then the second time through, like where I was just like excited to re-experience it as opposed to like kicking and screaming at first. I just think the whole chapter, like I agree, it's like a great short story. Like if you were to just do like a short story collection of like samples of people's work or something, like you could just like lift that chapter out for like Guy Gavriel Kay and just be like, experience how good of a writer he is. I like Rustum way more than I like Crispin. Although I do think I've
Yes.
grown to like Crispin more on my second read, and it's not like I dislike him at any point, but just Rustum is just like immediately likable, very principled, and I think I like principled characters, especially in the face of something that could really backfire on them. Like they're doing the right thing regardless of the cost of what it might mean to them. And just to put a pin in this, when you guys read Children of Earth and Sky, I want you to think back to this chapter when you get to it. I felt when I read that book, especially because that's the last Guy Gavriel Kay book I read, there's an echo of that chapter in that book, like not in like a direct, like it's not like Rustum shows up or thing, but just in terms of thematically that I really, really liked. And so, yeah, I really appreciated that. His son is such a good character. And like, yeah, just those like little touches of the fantastical really elevate. He like knows when to put them in and when to just like let things be just kind of like straight historical fiction almost. And yeah, the King of Kings, like I was actually really shocked the first time when it was the heir. Like I didn't see that coming. I just thought the king was going to die. And then somehow they were going to, I thought the scene was going to go that like they were going to exile Rustum to Sarantium instead of killing him because he wasn't one of his court or something. So I liked that he ended up doing that and stuff. And also, just as an aside, it's a crazy practice to kill all your doctors if they can't.
Nobody's going to be one of
like,
the doctor.
Yeah.
like absolutely insane. Like I live in Canada and there's a doctor crisis, and I'm just like thinking, I'm like, imagine if they just killed whenever like the premier or something couldn't be saved. They just like kill all these doctors. Like that's crazy.
And I don't want to make too much of it, really, but this is the second time we've seen a really compelling doctor character.
Hmm.
And I believe that Guy Gavriel Kay's father was a doctor. Am I right in that, Kyle? You
I don't
would,
know.
I don't think I've heard him talk about his dad.
okay.
Doctors and artists. He
I've heard him talk
loves
about his
doctors and
mom.
artists as
Yeah,
characters.
Yeah.
his so when I lived in the city that like in Winnipeg where Guy Gavriel grew up, I lived like a couple blocks from McNally Robinson, which is where he always goes. And when I saw him there, he was like, "Oh yeah, my mom was the first customer here. Like we lived down the block." And when they
Wow.
opened on the day, she was like there like 5 minutes after it opened or something. So as far as like the owner ever knew, Guy Gavriel mom was like the first customer at this bookstore, and so he always goes back there when he goes to Winnipeg. But I don't know anything about his dad.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. But and someone in the
Yeah,
comments will probably correct me if I'm
yeah.
wrong, but I believe that's the case. These doctors, like, I won't say too much because it would be a spoiler. But in Lions of El Rasan, obviously a doctor plays an important role in that, and there's a paternal doctor figure as well. And one of the things about Rustum to me is that this is a man who is trying, because of his culture, the certain notions about what it means to be a man. He's trying to be out of touch with his emotions, and he's not entirely successful at that, which makes me kind of love him more in a way. He tries to
Mm-hmm.
be, very principled and very like, oh well, my son, he's a little bit too affectionate, and I shouldn't, Shasky is the name of the son, I think, right? That's his nickname. And you can tell that he's melting a little bit there when he's leaving his son as well, and he's trying to be very stoic about it and very proper and all of that. So that's an aspect of his character that I appreciated as well, is that he tries to be very professional and unattached, and yet you can feel the emotions inside him as well. The way he responds to people, like when he's the one a really brilliant scene is when Stramosis, the chef, is begging him to help
Mm-hmm.
save the his
Yeah.
Kairos.
apprentice. Yeah.
Kairos, yeah.
Oh my goodness, Kairos. Yeah, that was such a beautiful scene. I
Yeah.
felt, and you can see again Rustum the professional versus Rustum the human, the person with emotions, and a bit of conflict there. We knew he was going to go back in and help save him, but
Same
yeah,
with Scordius too. Like when
Gordius as
he's
well.
like, I'm not like you're done, Bucko. Like you're out of here. Like you did this to yourself. You did this to your own damn
Yeah,
self.
yeah, yeah.
I will
I
not
did
help
everything
you
I could
again.
do.
After he's like, all right, you did just do like some transcendental sports magic. Like I guess
He's a
I'll help
he's a
you.
pushover. He's
Yeah.
a pushover.
Yeah.
But on Rustum, I love seeing the culture of Sarantium through the perspective of from an outsider like him. I mean, that was
Mhm.
a highlight of this book, and I love him. The book is essentially it's organized around two sort of major events. There's like a mini one at the beginning, which is the wedding of Kasia and Carolus. We have a lot of build up to that, then that happens, and then the second one, of course, is the hippodrome race and the assassination and all that stuff. That's all happening as one big event, and the book orbits around those two things, where the
Mhm.
whole end of the book is essentially just the kind of extended denouement or the effects of what happens there, which I'm totally fine with. But the way the role Rustum plays in the wedding, it's great because first of all, he has this clash with Cleander, who's a great character, even if we get annoyed by him.
Mhm.
Um, and then that one of the best moments in the book is when Rustum stomps over to Bossanos at the wedding. Is it Bossanos? Benosis at the wedding.
Gnosis. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, oh shit, now things are gonna pop off. And I love the tension there. And throughout the book, just getting the perspective of somebody who's not from this culture puts a nice gloss on what life is actually like in Sarantium, as opposed to somebody who's Crispin is not from Sarantium, but he's from a related culture,
Yeah.
or a culture maybe that you could say came before the culture of Sarantium, but they're related nonetheless. Whereas Rustum's perspective is much different.
I
Also,
think
gotta
it like
love
really
how.
helps interweave. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll go quick and then you
Yeah.
take over. But I was just gonna say I also love how he dyes his beard because everyone knows that some white in your beard makes you more distinguished, right? So and he even has a fake like staff that he walks
Are
around.
you doing that? Is that what you're doing?
Philip
Maybe.
is actually like 26 years old. Like, this is all for the clicks. He's not even a professor. He's just a guy reading One Piece, putting on a tweed jacket.
That's it. I've been
That's
found
all
out.
it takes. That's all it takes.
Yeah. Sorry, Kyle, you go ahead.
I totally forgot what I was going to say. It wasn't
Oh no.
important. It was just a follow up comment. It's okay. No.
All right, we'll come back to it, no doubt. But yes, that wedding scene was another great example of
Yeah.
a bunch of people in a room and
Hmm.
the tension and there's a lot of wistfulness to it as well because there were hints that Crispin and Cassia were going to be a thing, and, in the
Hmm.
first book.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that Guy Gavriel Kay does is like he keeps you guessing about, okay, you think it's going to be Jack and Jill, but it ends up being Jack and Hilda or whatever, I
Well,
mean,
Cassia has still has feelings for
very
Crispin,
much. And that scene
and
at the
she
end where she kisses him, that was
yeah,
just beautiful.
and she's ambivalent for certainly ambivalent about marrying Carolus.
Yeah,
At the
he's
beginning, I
not.
do think she's coming around by the end.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
I
yeah,
agree.
it definitely. I did remember what I was going to say, which was that I think that it helps the POV, like to what Evan was saying about we have a complete outsider. It's a foreign culture. We have somebody who is seeing the culture through the eyes of the old culture. That like this
Yep.
is he's almost like while Sarantium is the great city. There's a certain amount of like just arrogance a little to how Crispin would view them because he thinks his culture should be the older culture, but they're not. It's Sarantium, and so he's like, "Oh yeah, we're similar, but we're a little strange." Like, and how you guys do things. So he's still seeing it from an outsider's perspective, but informed. And then you have all of the characters in Sarantium and how much they place on it, like how Valerius and like even like Carolus, just all these like other characters see the idea of Sarantium or like living in the city and stuff like that. And I think that that all together kind of really helps paint the picture of Sarantium. And I was actually thinking about that while reading because the city feels so more the, alive. It feels so alive and bigger than life. And that's like a recurring thing throughout his books. There's no other books set in Sarantium, but a lot of these books are interconnected, and so they talk about Sarantium. It's a giant city, and some of them take place after that city would no longer exist, and some of them don't. But no matter what, it's this giant important city in the culture around them, and so it gets brought up in small or important ways throughout like all of his books, well, not all, but like a lot of them. And so you over time you just get this like vast appreciation for the city. And so rereading it, I was like, I do think the perspectives taken, the variety of different types of people that you see and how they experience the day to day of the city really makes it feel alive and bigger than life. And so I thought that was excellent as well.
Brilliant.
This
Yeah.
brings up a really important point. I think when you're talking about Sarantium as the city, because one kind of uh, uh, one curious thing about K, and we often talk about K's prose as being something beautiful, but we should talk about what kind of prose he's actually writing and what kind of prose he doesn't write. Because reading this book, and like I said, I tried to read it with attention. It is remarkable how little visual noticing he does in his writing.
Hmm.
Like, and I was reading other books after this. I read I wanted to sort of get a sense of how someone might deal with the same sort of material. So I read Mary Renault's Fire from Heaven, and I know that Mary Renault that Kay is a huge fan of Renault, and that's the trilogy, the Alexander trilogy, the trilogy of Alexander the Great,
Uh-huh.
and her evocation of Macedonia in that period is just so alive with little details,
Mm.
physical details, sight details, details of how things smell, and everything feels very lived in, and you get transported there. I do feel like what Kyle's saying is you do get a sense that there's something bigger happening in Sarantium, but it's not a visual sensation. There's one quote where Giselle where she wakes up and there's a quote that says, "Even though she had known Sarantium could overawe and had been preparing for it, Giselle learned when the sun rose that morning behind the imperial city that sometimes there was no real way to prepare oneself." And that's it. We don't get anything about what overawed her. We don't get like a few paragraphs of this is the way the sun glinted off the domes. I'm reading Zola right now. I'm reading the masterpiece about the impression. I'm doing a project on the impressionists, and I'm reading about it's about an artist who's walking through Paris, and all we get is the way the artist sees Paris in these beautiful paragraphs of description. Kay just is not interested in that, and that it's worth saying that his interests and what the characters think about and talk about, it's not phenomenological. He's interested in social structures. The characters are always more preoccupied when they're thinking about institutions and social and political structures and the way people behave. That's what they're thinking about. And it's so fascinating to me because there are times when I wish I saw Sarantium, this beautiful big city. I wish I saw it more than what he gives me. I can't impose this style on him. He's clearly got different interests, but it's worth talking about because I think that's true in all his books to a certain extent. There's not a lot of physical texture, not a lot of visual noticing in his prose.
And yeah, he does
I've
give
never
you
realized that.
nice. He does give you a feel for the place, and you
Yeah.
mentioned Giselle's impression, and then he also has these little flames or will-o'-the-wisps or whatever going around
Yeah.
in the city, and there's this sense of magic about the place. So yeah, that's a great observation. I do
Maybe
want
this is why. Sorry,
go ahead, Kyle. You
just
make
one
your
quick thing,
point.
and then you go. Maybe this is why I like him so much because I don't care about descriptions of cities because I don't really picture them. Like I'll picture them how I want to anyway. Like I don't. Like you can sit there and tell me about a den, and I'm like, I'm not picturing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it does remind me. I had forgotten about this until you said it. That the first time I was reading Sailing to Sarantium in my head, like because he doesn't include these details, I was picturing like Crispin and like Giselle and all of these people in like not Rome but Rome, like living in like just like the forest, like not like just like not huts, but like just like very uncivilized. And like I didn't really consider what it was like clearly invoking until like I got further into the story. I'm like, oh, this is what like they live in a city. Like it's not they don't live in like tents and stuff. But like in my head, because he doesn't describe anything, and they're like the old civilization, I was just like kind of naturally imagining like barely civilization. And I'm like, no, they clearly still like live in a city. It's just not as great as Sarantium. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it makes sense because he's not describing anything that you can just fill in those details however your brain felt. So
I do want to get back to some of these unlikely couples that we meet, or ill-fated
Yes.
couples, or whatever, because there are some really important events that, as you said earlier, Evan, swirl around the wedding scene. And one of them is Crispin and Stylianne and their relationship and what eventually happens with her, a very tragic character, obviously, whose life has basically been dictated by the event that ended in her father being burned alive horrifically. That was the defining event of her life, and of course, she and her brother have this plot going on, and she says to Crispin in that moment, "Whatever else happens, don't forget this. What you saw in me tonight." You know, essentially, I'm misquoting it, but you know what I mean.
mm-hmm.
I think that's what she meant. So yeah, let's talk about Stylianne a bit too, because the women characters in this that are really important. You have Stylianne and you have Giselle, who turns out to be a pretty clever in her machinations and her decision kind of not thought out, but it turns out to be a stroke of genius because she ends up with Leontes in this same evening. And of course, we have the Empress. We need to talk about her more, but perhaps later, especially when we talk about the repercussions of the Emperor's assassination. But yeah, your thoughts, guys, on Stylianne, perhaps. We could go and talk about her and the relationship with Crispin, which I think we got to see her humanity through him. Like she's not just a simple twisted villain. we got a different glimpse of her because of Crispin that we wouldn't have had otherwise. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, we get a sex scene with her and Crispin that
Yeah.
is remarkably similar to a lot of the sex scenes we've read so far in
Yeah.
GGK. I mean, it is you got to have one in every GGK book. There is
Yeah.
some rough stuff there. But before he even meets Stylian, he's with Pertenius, or the Procopius character. Then he goes to
Right.
meet Stylian.
Right. Right.
She is a very interesting character because in the historical version of this, the wife of Belisarius, who is Leontes is based on,
Leonti's character.
is also a lower class woman like Theodora, you know,
Interesting.
and Kay felt that he didn't want two of that same sort of kind of character, so he made her into this patrician-like character, and I think it elevates the story so much because she has a clear kind of she
Class
has
distinction.
she has a class hatred for what Alexana is, and how and Justinian, because Justin it's not just I'm sorry, I'm using a real
Hilarious.
real one, Valerius.
Yeah.
But Justinian and Justin before him were lowborn people before
Correct.
they rose up through the ranks to become emperor. So to have this woman who is from the patrician classes felt that her father deserved to be the emperor because of his lineage, and obviously that's what her brothers felt too. I love what that puts into motion, the perspective it gives us on the other characters like Alexana and Valerius.
Mm. Kyle, any thoughts on these characters?
I love your thoughts on that. I agree with a lot of it. I I think my least favorite pairing in this entire, maybe if I thought about it, there might be a different one, but I don't. Crispin and Styliana I don't get it at all. Like when people criticize, they're like, oh yeah, all these women like Crispin. I can steel man why you could make that choice for each one of the other women. Like I'm like, okay, he saved uh, Cassia. Like I think Alexiana is. I mean, that one's a little bit of a stretch, but I can at least see how they were like kindred spirits to a degree. Like I can actually buy the connection between them in terms of like a spiritual, like intellectual connection. Shivan,
Giselle,
yeah, Giselle is like
Yeah.
her. Well, I don't think that was really romantic so much as it was like her utilizing her
She
sexuality
was
a bit on
manipulating
him.
him.
Yeah,
he
for
was
sure.
performing. Yeah,
Which
yeah.
yeah, and then also like Shirvan, I just think was like just found him attractive more than anything. But Styliana, I'm just like I don't get it. Like on reread, I thought that I would like maybe see more of it, but I'm just like I just think this is the main character syndrome for sure. That's the only one where I feel like that is where it is. He's like, oh, what if everybody wanted Crispin? I mean, you could have pulled back with one character. But I think she's a brilliant character otherwise. Like I don't like that has nothing to do with my feelings for them individually. Um, I just don't like. Even I agree with what you said, Philip, about how I think we saw her humanity through Crispin, and like
Right.
she's not like a one dimensional. I just don't get why it's with Crispin. Like I don't see what attracted her to him. Like why she showed up at his house or his room. Like ridiculous,
In
but
the first
whatever.
book. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but I will say that the relationship that really, really intrigues me beyond the obvious one of Alexiana and Styliana and their hatred there is Valerius and Styliana, because I think Valerius's chief flaw here, and like I would say it's a virtue in life. Like this is this mercy. Like it's good that he has mercy, but he had these three people live, and I think most emperors would not let these kids live.
Right.
Um, and that is his downfall. And it's interesting his arrogance and hubris with Styliana. Um, and I think it would be really easy. I was thinking about it this way on my reread of like, I think a lesser author would have made it be sexism a little, where like they would have Valerius be like, oh well, she's a woman, we'll be like she'll be tractable, like we'll be able to like placate her. And actually, it was that he respected her intelligence so much. He was so convinced that he would be able to turn her. And because he's like, she's very smart. She's one of the smartest people here. So I think that I can turn her and get her into like my plans. Like he was banking on her intelligence triumphing over her desire for vengeance. And when she laughs at the idea of like him burning, and she's like, "I'll burn with you," when he like grabs her, and he's like, I was wrong. Oh my God. I was completely wrong. This woman's chief thing is not that she's intelligent. It's her revenge. Her desire for revenge is the thing that motivates her, the thing that drives her. And no matter what my plans were for her, that would have never gotten past that revenge. There was nothing I could have done to get her past this. This is what her heart's desire was, revenge. And just this like realization he had in that moment that he had like both overestimated and underestimated her. Like he just completely misread her as what drives her. And I think that was so interesting. I think a lot of worse authors would have made that a more cut and dry reasoning. And I thought that's a very complex reason for Valerius to have been like met his downfall.
Yeah, well said.
That's a great point.
The other,
Let's run through who has sex after the wedding.
so I want to talk about Giselle and Leontes. So let's do.
So there's Shirin and Scordius, Giselle and Leontes,
Right.
Carolus and Casia, but that's marital.
Okay, then they're getting married.
Yeah, and Crispin and Stilian. So you want to do?
I think Giselle is one that really interests me because it's a spur of the moment decision in a way for her. And I thought she had some great moments in this book, by the way. Like, for example, I loved when she climbs the scaffolding and manipulates Crispin in that moment and makes a scene on purpose to get people talking, and how she is kind of shoved aside, but she won't have it. She and Crispin plays a role, of course, in bringing her before Leontes in the end, and really twisting victory into defeat for Stylian and her brother who's remaining. The useless brother who really didn't do much anyway, the coward. But yeah, Giselle impressed me in this one because she succeeded in. Well, she's the winner in the end, essentially. But it's not just she wants to be victorious for her own ambition. She's trying to save her homeland as well. She's trying to save Batiera from being invaded. And then Crispin is much more impotent. He also feels bad about it, but he's just kind of like, well, what can I do? I'm just a mosaicist. I'm just an artist, and he's so impressed and overwhelmed by Valerius and his genius. And I buy into it too. I think Valerius is. I'm rooting. I didn't want him to die, and yet look at the stuff he does. He's proposing invading an entire country to fulfill his ambition. He burned a man alive. In many ways, he's actually a terrible person. But I was rooting for him because he's
everybody
nice.
Burns one person a lot. Come
Right.
on, everybody does one.
So anyway, Giselle really impressed me, and I thought she had some great moments in this book. So I don't know what your thoughts are. And that she ends up with Leontes in the end, the golden girl, with him, with the golden boy in the end, with Batiera being spared the invasion. But again, Guy Gavriel Kay is subverting history here or changing the story because, as we discussed last time, the historical character that Giselle is based on actually died in that assassination.
Yeah.
And so she wouldn't have been in part 2, right? But because she's there, the invasion of Rome / Batiera doesn't happen, right? But that's because of her determination at the end, along with getting some help from our boy Crispin. So yeah. Any thoughts on her or and Leontes? Their eventual.
She's admittedly a character that I don't think about as much in this book. Like I everything you say, I agree with. Like I think she's great. I just like when I think of my emotional reactions or intellectual engagements with the book both times, she's usually on the lesser side of things. But I do love that, like just her determination to save her people, and like yeah, she does end up being the winner of this like game. Because Leontes was already close enough. Like Leontes' distance is very small, but like she really had to work to get to where she was, and she did it. I think we could have maybe used a little bit more with her in the first book to make this a little bit more powerful for me. Because the second book is just so overcrowded with characters, and I love that. Like I think it's a boon, not a disservice to the book, but some characters get lost in that. And because Giselle ends up being so important to the end game, I think there should have just been more in the first book with her, or just like this book could be slightly longer with more from her or something. I don't know, but it's not like I don't think it was well deserved. It just like, to me, I was like, oh yeah, that's like how this should go. Like it was a really good victory for her, but I never felt like, to me, all the things at the end that are important are like Crispin and the other characters saying bye to each other, and like Rustum like going to Spain, and like all these other characters' endings feel more impactful to me.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I like Giselle. I mean, I liked the way she's kind of kept in the wings. I mean, I think to a certain extent he's got to keep her in the wings so that the ending can be surprising enough, because it is a
Hmm.
surprise that that's how it works out. And
For
obviously
sure.
this Giselle and Leonte scene earlier in the book makes it so that it's not completely inconceivable that they might be, a match later on. But I do like there's a scene, the scene before she goes up the scaffolding to manipulate Crispin. It's a very typical Guy Gavriel case scene where Giselle is it's the same scene where she's waking up overawed by the city, and we don't get a description of that. But then what happens is the succession of people come to visit her at her home that she's been set up with, and one person by person she is dissecting how they fit into the hierarchy of power in Sarantium, and that she is a power player, and that is something that is shown so beautifully in the scene. She's not if she does pick up on physical things, it's because they are somehow symbols of what that person means to the society, or what that person is trying to get out of her. So I think she is a shrewd character,
Hmm.
and like to me her sections are not as poignant. For example, like of all these pairings in the post wedding coitus uh athon,
Weddings get people
the
randy, okay? Like,
The,
Yeah.
the one the one that's my favorite is the Crispin and Pertenius section.
Uh-huh.
And Pertenius is a
And they
character
didn't
we
have any.
absolutely
There was nothing romantic about that, though.
there
Yeah.
was nothing romantic, but I actually thought when Crispin went into his house, like what's happening here? And all of a sudden Crispin, because that's where he ends a chapter with like the door closing. And I thought, wow, Crispin just became much more interesting. Um, eh, I want to talk about Pertenius because he is the Procopius character, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
the historian figure of the book, who the real Procopius writes the history of the wars of Belisarius, and he writes about the building projects, and he's the primary source of the reign of Justinian. But then in the 1600s, they find in the Vatican this book called The Secret History, which is something he wrote that wasn't found till all this time later, that is just a vicious taking apart of Justinian and Theodora, accusing them of all kind of like uh, dark arts, magic, like sacrifices, sex, all kinds of crazy stuff. And we actually get this amazing scene in Lord of Emperors where Pretenius is just wasted. Crispin is there. He falls asleep and he's like looking around on the table, and we see a section of the secret history. And
that's
that was
crazy. I did not know this. This is like
oh it's
makes
so
that scene
awesome.
so much better to me. Yeah.
The fact that it didn't get found until 1620, and Kay has written, because we're talking about history as a big theme of this book.
Yeah.
And Kay has written, like, for characters like Justinian from all this time ago, we are so dependent on what a historian says, um, to know what actually happened or what they may have been like. And the fact that we have these two totally competing narratives of what the reign of Justinian was like, maybe behind the scenes or not, is it goes right to his theme of the historian is the one who essentially will construct our understanding of what the past is. And like I said, it's extra poignant that the historian is the one that ends up
Yeah.
stabbing
Hilarious.
Valerius. And there's this great quote
I
at
think I'm
right
about to say.
after. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
okay, you said a quote. I have a
There's
quote
this
lined
great
up
quote
very
I want to
specifically for
I
this.
want to show it because it's so good. From right after he kills them, um, where he was so seldom noticed, An historian, a recorder of events, hovering and gray. I love that. I mean, that's a good adjective.
Brilliant.
Gray, present everywhere, but not ever someone who ever played any kind of role in events. Going up the stairs swiftly, then hurrying through the palace toward an upper staircase and an enclosed walkway that led to the rear of the cathedra, he was already casting his mind after phrasings, a way to begin, the proper tone of detachment and reflection. So now we're back into this like omniscient narrator, detached, a reflection at the outset of a chronicle it's so important how you start your chronicle of the history. Even the most perfunctory study of past events teaches that Jad's just retribution for the godless and evil may be long in coming, but so it's
That
just
wasn't
it's perfect. It's perfect.
It really is. Yeah.
that wasn't the line that I had, but it's like right after this page, I think, which is very like relevant to the theme of this, which is the records can miss everything, of course. So much depends on what else is preserved in writing, in art, in memory, false or true or blurred. And that's when he's going back
Yeah.
and like they're in the thing with Styliana and Leontes, and like Leontes kills Lysippidus and stuff like that. And he's like, I'm not ever going to write about this, but I need to know about it. And then he
Yeah.
says that. And I thought that was really putting a fine point on the idea that he gets to choose what's in the histories, but there's so much
Yes.
more. And then that even just tying it into an art and memory is like bridging the gap for the reader of like from history to art to memory, which are kind of like three of the big themes here, like what you remember, and obviously how art can make you move, and then history. So I feel like that one sentence just like brings together all of the themes in one
Totally.
really compact statement.
And Pertenius's passage from his little secret history is an echo of the hatred that Stylian harbors for uh, Alexandra. And so you have that same kind of feeling running through these two characters, and you see what a character like Alexandra is up against.
And speaking
While I was looking for that, I found the quote that I had highlighted about Valerius earlier, recognizing Styliana's intelligence not being the thing that motivates her, and I just think it's a really good quote. So I just want to read it real quick.
Go for it.
He had thought, had always believed.
Oh, sorry, I'm still here.
Oh, that's okay.
He had thought, had always believed, intelligence could overmaster hatred, given time, tutelage. It is not so, he sees now. Too late. Aliana was right. Gisus was right. Styliana, brilliant as a diamond, might welcome power and wield it with Leontes, but it is not her need, not the key to the woman. The key, beneath the ice of her, was fire.
Yeah, brilliant. And speaking of Alexana, who becomes Aliana again at the end of this because of events, let's talk about her for a while, because I think her thread in here becomes more poignant, particularly in the moment when she knows, because of the assassination attempt on her, which was averted basically by Crispin. And he's a little bit late, but he does finally explain. Actually, there was a magic bird that actually was serving as this guy's eyes, and he knew it was you the whole time. And then there's the assassination attempt, and which he helps to avert by pushing the one. What were they? The Excubators.
The Excubators, yeah.
Yeah. He pushes the one who was trying to kill the faithful one, and helps save the faithful one's life, who is then able to get her back to the city. But yeah, well, she knows in that moment when she's in the boat that Valerius is gone.
And her life is over.
And her life is over, and she is already making preparations. Like, I mean, she shows a stunning intelligence even in that moment, in an overwhelming, emotional, devastating moment. She's already tearing up her dress, scrubbing her face, getting ready to be. I mean, I love how she uses her acting skills throughout to be.
Yeah, it's great.
And then to assume these different roles. And then we learn that she was the one who visited Rustum earlier to find out about
Yes.
if she could become pregnant. I thought that was a great little touch. I didn't see that one coming at all.
No, me either.
But yes, and she makes her way back to the city, and the only thing keeping her alive there is vengeance. But she's powerless really to obtain it. And then I think one of my favorite scenes is when she shows up at Rustum's place of all places
That is a great scene.
to ask
Hmm.
for asylum, basically, and of course the soldiers show up and she's uses her acting skills. She's got enough spirit left to summon her acting skills again and even swear in Bassinian and play that role and to a shockingly effective degree for poor Rustum.
And Rustum slaps her, and
And
I can
snaps
in that
her.
moment I was like, oh, in a moment I could just put myself in her shoes, like, are you serious right now?
But
It's a
later
great
she's like, "No,
moment.
you did well. That was good." Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But it's interesting to think because we have that famous speech remembered in the first book, which is taken right from the pages of history,
Yeah.
that she would rather, during the Nika riots or the Victory riots, that it would be much better to die uh, in the purple of royalty
Yes.
than slink away in exile.
But
And
this is
yet
a
in this
more
book,
human. This is a human
yeah,
version, and Theodora actually historically she died of we think what cancer or something.
yeah, it was, yeah, nothing
Yeah.
nefarious.
But
Um,
Alexana or Aliana lives on, and I'm particularly interested in what you thought of her the ending where she shows up in Battiera at the chapel and sees herself on the wall and ends up with Crispin at the end, and instead of Sheeran, because I was expecting Sheeran to show up, but
of course, yeah.
of course, Kay does a little switcheroo there on me, and I was like, first I was like, wait, what? But then I
But
thought,
did you ever feel either of you? Did you ever feel the Crispin Aliana Alexandra? Did you feel that that was set up, or is it
was
merely a
it earned?
surprise?
Are you asking, was it earned?
Yeah. Well, I mean, earn is a weird word for it because um none of the links that Crispin makes with any of the female characters are like some kind of big romantic story. In fact, his romance is over. I mean, he had a wife and he had kids, and they're gone. And his grief is such a huge part of the first book in this one. And he has dalliances with these characters. And in the moment, in the sex scene with Stilian, he even says that that was a big moment in terms of getting over the grief he had. He was able to sort of come back into himself a little bit. And there are moments he has with Alexana. I don't think it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like the perfect pairing, but also the book I think is also saying that there really is no perfect
Right.
pairing for
I think Kay
Crispin
says
now.
that a
Like,
lot. He says that a lot.
yeah,
Hmm.
The
and this
moment for
one
me,
is and this one is good for both of them. And it works for both of them.
and
And we are
what
led
made
to believe that it's going to continue to work.
Yeah, and the moment for me, and I agree with what everything you just said, that convinced me, okay, I think maybe this does work, was when they're in the boat, and she asks him, "How did you
How do you go on living?
how do you go on living when you've lost
Yeah,
your spouse?" That was the moment where I thought, okay, yes, there is something very important they have in common here.
yeah,
And he clearly I mean, basically, I mean, he was almost worshipful of her prior to this, but you can see there was definitely attraction. We never really got as much into her POV, so whether or not she felt any actual like attraction for him before then is not clear. But
yeah. I also think she was like clearly very in love with Valerius, and
yes,
so that would have. I just think that at the time she wouldn't have thought of him that way. My
and
first
a
read,
year has passed, so yeah,
yeah, my first read, I was way more like on Evan's spectrum of this. I'm like, I don't hate it, but I don't really. On reread, I think it worked way better for me. I now that I knew that was the ending, I do think that it's set up like reasonably well. Like I don't think it's perfect. I think he could have done some more stuff. But I really think the key is that she asks him, like, doesn't she also ask him in Sailing to Sarantine, how did you go on living, or was that somebody else? I know that it's get asked twice, but
huh.
I
I
can't
don't
remember who
remember
asked the
it from
first
this
time.
one, but you might be right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
But yeah, so she says, like, how did you go on living? And so they have this shared connection of they're the only two people that have lost a spouse that, like, I mean, that they love. Like Leontes loses a spouse, but nobody cares.
I don't think he
Um,
loved her very much.
yeah, exactly. And they do have this, like, I do think they have like a very deep connection in terms of what their interest was. Like, I mean, with the dolphins and stuff, and what the dolphins mean to her. And they're this like heretical thing that like she's not really supposed to care about so much, and she like confides that with Crispin. And Crispin is also like, for better or worse, around for like an extremely like hard time for her and saves her life, which like I'm not saying that you should just fall over head,
Huh.
but like it's still like you're gonna think back to that with like more fondness, and like he helped save her, and she was already trusting him. But I really think the key of it is how did you go on living, and like she didn't think she was gonna live. Like the whole narrative of after he died, after Petrus dies, is that she's gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna kill Stiliana, and I'm out of here. Like peace. And then she doesn't do that, and so we're missing that year of time with her, and I don't think the narrative has time for it. Like I guess you could technically like give her a couple chapters in that interim, or like a couple pages to bridge that gap, but I think it's doing that to try to surprise the reader as well, because like I think we all expect
Yeah,
Siobhan,
yeah,
and so to keep the element of surprise, and also just like the book is kind of wrapping up, like you don't want to belabor the point maybe too much, but I do think that like now she lives and she's no longer the Empress. She's back to Aliana, and she had this connection with somebody, and they have this like shared grief that they're working through. And we don't know how long that journey took her or what the deal was there, but I think it works a lot better when you're looking for it. Because the first time I was like, this is Guy Gavriel just being like, wouldn't it be cool if we ended up with the Empress? Like, but I do think there's a lot more going on than
but
I
I
gave
also
it
I
credit
also
for the
think that
first time.
it's not a soulmate connection. It's not that type
For
of book.
sure, yeah.
You
Yes.
know, and so it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be something where, okay, he laid all the seeds here, the romantic tension is growing and growing and growing and growing, and it feels that like feeling of closure for us at the end. It is something that is possible and that works for both of them, and there
They're
is.
survivors. They're both
Yeah,
survivors.
Yeah.
That's the
yeah,
bond.
and
There's a line
they
I
could have just gone on
highlighted.
being they could have just
Sorry.
gone on being friends too. I mean, but you know,
Yep.
it works as it is, and there is a short story that Kay wrote that's set after this book in which
Oh.
Alexana has two kids with Crispin, and it's like about their. I haven't read it, but it's like about their lives.
What? How don't
After
I know
she.
about this? Where is this? What did you just come in from some sort of bizarro alternate universe? I've never heard of that. This is crazy. That's the
Yeah,
first thing I'm
I
going to do when I
think
go to the
I
stream.
mean I could be completely wrong, but I'm almost positive that's the case. I think you can read about it on the Wikipedia for
I have to read
Sarantine
about it.
Mosaic.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have to.
I cannot
I think
believe
he
I haven't
wrote
heard of
I think
this.
he wrote the short story as like part of like some kind of charity thing or whatever. I don't know, but it does
Interesting.
revisit those characters.
The quote that I had highlighted about this was, "You had to live," Crispin thought, "in order to have anything to say about living, but you needed to find a way to withdraw to accomplish that saying." I think that that's doing a lot of narrative work in the background of the idea that like they both just have to keep on living. They have to find ways to keep living, and like it's a running joke amongst me, really only myself, that I can't go a live stream without mentioning The Wire, which is the greatest TV show of all time. But in that show, there is a scene where Bubbles has a monologue, and I don't want to spoil for anybody who has not watched The Wire. Great show, go watch it. But in that, he's like talking about some grief that he has. He's like, it's okay to hold on to grief as long as you make room for something else, for other things too. And I really feel like that's what they're doing there too. Is like the loss of his wife and his daughters, and her loss of Petrus will never go away, but they have to keep on living. And they find that connection in each other. So
That's beautifully said, Kyle. Yeah, yeah. Well
Yeah.
said.
So what about the mosaic under the dome that is no
oh
more?
man, yes. This is the most incredible thing about the book to me. Not my favorite part, but especially the first time I read this book. Remember, we talked about Now I Appreciate Art. I saw the Children of Time thing. I was inspired. I was like, oh my god, art has value now. Um, but the first time I read it, I was just like, yeah, I don't care about mosaics. Like, I do not care. And he's just going on and on about this. And it's not like I didn't like appreciate what he was trying to do with it in terms of my investment in this mosaic or anything else. I don't care about seeing the Hagosphere. I'm an uncultured swine. I don't care. And then I'm driving to see Guy Gavriel, and he's talking about this mosaic having to come down. And the line is I have work to do up there, his daughters. Today's task, memory and craft and light. They will only bring it down. The secretary's voice was uncomprehending. Crispin did turn then to look back over his shoulder. They were staring at him, the three of him. So were others in the sanctuary. He said, I understand, but they will have to do that. Bring it down. I will make what I make in this civilized holy place. Others will have to give the orders to destroy, as barbarians destroyed Rhodius since it could not defend herself. And then like very briefly right after that, he says, it wasn't a waste. There was meaning to this, as much as he could bring to bear on any single action in his life. But it was an ending. Another journey lay ahead, home at the end of it. Just the idea that he was memorializing his wife and kids in this, and like other stuff too, but like his whole, all of his grief, and he's a mosaicist, but like the whole story, he has been depressed, and like he hasn't really felt that joy for life, and he starts to uh, throughout this journey, like the books, and he puts it all into his art, which is like tying back to what I said at the very beginning, where like now that I do 988 and like talk to people when they're like very depressed, that's very frequently what people get people through, which I think you don't need to do that kind of work to know that, but hearing how people talk about it is really impactful, and how like just like the idea of like being able to draw something that they really loved has gotten them through like the darkest time in their life or something like that. And so then when he's doing all of this, and they're going to bring it down anyway, and it's a loss, it's this crippling loss that this will not be there for all time, that people will not know. Sorry, I know that I'm going on, but there was a brief part up here. Uh, Dang, I can't find it. Okay, anyway, but
We'll find it.
where he
We'll
was
blast
talking
it.
about how somebody will look up and know that an unnamed man loved this woman and kids. Like they don't have to know, but that will be there for all time. So he has to deal with this heartbreaking loss that will not be there, that his art will not stand the test of time. And then he decides in that moment, I have to finish it anyway. This isn't for you. You can do whatever you want to do. Barbarians destroyed Rome, all of their culture, all their history, all of their memory. They came through the gates and they destroyed. That's all they knew how to do. They destroyed. But I am a mosaicist, and God damn it, I create. And he went up there and he had finished what he had to do, and then he was done. And he got out all that grief, and there was a new journey, the journey home. And I just, even like rereading it the second time, reading it the second time, I was just like in tears. Like I just think it's so beautiful. And it's not like the chariot scene is my favorite scene, but in terms of what that does for me emotionally is just so strong.
And I think it's crucial too that his
Beautifully said.
of the new mosaic in the chapel, which is not going to be seen by a lot of people like that one would have been. Uh, his whole attitude toward it has changed. He has changed as a person. He has almost transcended in a sense. He's outgrown Leontes and the others. And boy, there are moments when I like Leontes fine. And then the thing is, I can't stand it when people destroy art. I have it's
Mm-hmm.
physically painful for me. Particularly when the motivation is sort of a religious one, where and that is Leontes. I mean, very principled guy, I suppose, but he has no compunction whatsoever. He doesn't understand what he's destroying, and it makes me so like ah. But Crispin has actually, I think, transcended that, and you can see it in his attitude toward the new mosaic that he's making. It's a private conversation between him and his understanding of the human experience, and he's able to express what he was trying to express on that giant vault, that dome. He's able to do it in a more humble way, but in a way that digs just as deep, that is just as meaningful at the end. So I thought that was
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's a beautiful summation to so many of the themes that he's been talking about up until this point. To bring, first of all, to bring in the real history the iconoclasm forward in time,
Yeah.
and put it into Leontes, is a great move because we get this beautiful scene. What Philip and Kyle are talking about for Crispin, it's the act of doing it that is the important thing. As much as he wants something to live on and endure, the fact that he did it, and the line that always gets to me is when he says they're going to take it down, and he says they're going to have to do that. That's an action too.
Yeah.
So until
Mm-hmm.
they do that, I'm going to continue the work that I have to do. But it also goes to this, much larger thing about what we leave behind and what doesn't get left behind, and about the role of the artist and the role of this story. And I mean, one interesting thing about this book is that there are lots of forms of art in this book that are not inherently built to last, like Strombosis's cooking.
Yes.
That's an art, but it doesn't
Hmm.
have the staying power, if you will, of what a mosaic could potentially have, or what a painting could potentially have.
Also, what
Kay has,
Scordius and Terrace do
yes,
with the when like Astagoras is like looking at it, he's like, "This is art," and it's more beautiful by the fact that it was done the minute it was finished. There's no. It reminds
totally.
me
And Kay
actually more of
has,
like wrestling and stuff, where it's like you have to like put a performance into it.
Yeah.
well, but Kay even said that. Kay said that, we can hear about the exploits of athletes, but even athletes as far as 150, 200 years ago, we can't ever experience what they did. I mean, we can
Mhm.
experience the paintings we can experience the mosaics of stuff that's happened in Justinian's reign. In fact, the mosaics that Crispin makes back in Verona are, for all intents and purposes, the mosaics that are in Ravenna now of Justinian and the people around him. So Kay was deliberately invoking those ones, which you can go now and see. They lasted for 1,500 years. But there are so many forms of expression that by their nature can't last, and
Mhm.
they are eaten up by the Lord of Emperors, which is time in this book. And there's a great conversation in the scene with Rustum and Alexandra where she says something like, you know, maybe it's the artists and the historians, maybe they're the ones who are the real Lord of Emperors, because they're the ones who are going to define us
That's a great
in
part.
future
Yeah.
in future days. And so this idea of and it made me think of my dad, because
Mm.
my dad loves to build sandcastles. And then when I was a kid, every time we went to the beach, every summer, every day, he'd build a new sandcastle. And they're amazing, like he's so good at it. People would come and watch and take pictures and stuff. And, next morning,
God.
that's all gone. And he never cared, meanwhile, I'm trying to I'm obsessed with making art that lasts. He's got this great quality of not really caring, but that is essentially what's going to happen to everything we make.
Yep.
It's going to get washed away by time. And so, similar to Kyle, it's a very emotional part of this book, and it's a very poignant part that wraps up all the major themes.
And it was set up early too. He was warned by Silean
Yes,
Hmm.
that this don't get too attached here, buddy. Yeah.
because she knew
I
that
do
was her
have to get
plan. That was
going.
her plan.
Yeah.
I know we're like wrapping up soon, but I do have to get going.
Yeah.
Just baby's up, and my wife needs some help.
Yep. Oh yeah, we're
Um,
about done, I think. So final word?
Yep.
so yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me on this. It was a really great pleasure to talk about this. Also, like Evan and Philip come with like prepared thoughts and like essays and all this stuff about they're channeling their AP Canavans. I go off what is dubbed vibes. And so I find like talking about this stuff so good because as I'm talking, I'm realizing what a scene means to me or why I interpret it that way, or I'm bouncing off Evan, I'm bouncing off Philip, or I'm like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And that ties into this. And so like these discussions are always just so great, especially with something as deep and rich as Guy Gavriel K.
So we're
Um,
creating our own art here, aren't we?
we're creating our own art, and you know what? It's recorded. We are the Lord of
And it's gonna
Emperors.
last forever. It's gonna last forever. It will
Before I
never
go,
die.
I just want to share my favorite quote from the book,
Okay.
which is I feel like a good place to end, but like obviously Evan can talk, but I'll leave after this, so this will be my ending,
Okay.
and this is after Valeris dies. It is not recorded by anyone, for it never is nor ever can be, whether he hears as he dies an implacable, vast, infinite voice saying to him and to him alone in that corridor under palaces and gardens and the city and the world, uncrown. The Lord of Emperors awaits you now. Nor is it known if dolphins come for his soul when it leaves, as it does leave then, unhoused for its long journey. It is known, but only by one person in the God's world, that his last thought as a living man is of his wife, her name. And this is so because she hears it, and hearing, somehow hearing him, understands that he is going from her, is gone, that it is over, ended, done, After all, the brilliant dance that had begun long ago when he was Petrus and she was Eliana of the Blues, and so young, and the afternoon sun is bright above her and all of them in a cloudless springtime sky over Sarantium. I just think that is incredibly beautiful and poignant. And with that, I have to go rescue my wife from my crying baby. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much for being
Thank you so much, Kyle. It's great to meet you and wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah. So I love that quote that Kyle ended with because I do think that it shows to the power and the importance of the human connection. Uh,
Yeah.
that there are so many beautiful and wonderful things we can do with our lives, but in the end, what I think matters most is those connections that we make with people,
Yeah.
and even talking about books is one way we can do that. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's a poignant book. And it's an elegiac book too, similar to some of his other ones.
yeah,
We never talked about the and we don't have to, but the rise of Islam is happening in the background
yes,
of all this.
yes,
And that is another thing that will put an end to the world as the people in this novel know it. It's
I,
never mentioned, but it's hanging over everything.
yeah,
And that's another a beautiful, poignant dimension to what's going on here. And I feel that it's echoed in the sentiments of the quote that Kyle just read. The ending of things is always sad, but
yeah.
yeah, come on, man, we did it, Philip. It's just me and you.
I know we're
8 books, halfway through the
halfway through
GGGKR.
the GGGKR, the GGGKR being another of these life journeys, that
I compare it to the mosaic that Crispin made on the top of the Hagia Sophia dome.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
it will be remembered long after we're gone.
yeah. But thank you, my friend. This has been another great discussion, another great journey, and I'm very glad that we're on this together. So,
Me
and
too,
we
man. I
will,
can't wait for the second half.
yeah, second part two. We are going to be meeting in a month or so to talk about Last Light of the Sun. That's the next one, I believe. There it is, and I am so excited because look at that's a Viking ship. Woo! Oh, there's a
Yeah,
good
this is
one.
what I'm excited about is book 2 in this series. That's what I'm
Aw,
excited about.
thank you so
Love
much.
this
And
one.
little shout out to Alan who couldn't make this discussion, but did I think you can agree he did an amazing job as the audiobook narrator.
Fabulous job
Yeah.
of at the audiobook. I was blown away. But I was blown away by the book too. So I mean, it all goes together.
Well, thank you so much, my friend. Much, much appreciated. But that is it for us for now. Until next time.